Have you ever walked out of a clinic, paused for a second, and thought, why did that sound so familiar? You visit one doctor, then another, maybe even in a completely different place, and somehow the message echoes back to you in almost the exact same words. Eat better, sleep properly, move your body, reduce stress. It almost feels like you've heard it 100 times before. And if you're being honest, a small part of you wonders, if it's so important, why does it sound so simple? Shouldn't something that affects your life so deeply feel more complicated, more advanced, more extraordinary? But what if the real mystery isn't why doctors repeat the same advice? What if the real mystery is why we keep expecting a different answer? Because hidden inside those ordinary words is something far more powerful than it first appears. Something tested not just once, but thousands of times across millions of lives. Something so reliable that no matter who you are, where you come from, or what your condition is, it keeps showing up again and again. Not because medicine lacks imagination, but because it has discovered something that works. And today we're going to pull that idea apart. We're going to question it, examine it, and understand it in a way that most people never do. Why do experts, after years of study and experience, still come back to the same simple truths? What is it about these repeated words that makes them so difficult to ignore, yet so easy to overlook? And most importantly, what happens when you finally stop searching for a new answer and start understanding the one that's been in front of you all along? Stay with me, because by the end of this, that boring advice may not sound so ordinary anymore. If you pay close attention to the advice given by different doctors, in different hospitals, in different countries, something curious begins to appear. No matter how advanced the equipment, how specialized the field, or how complicated the condition, the core advice often circles back to the same few ideas. Eat better, move your body, sleep properly, manage stress, avoid harmful habits. At first glance, it feels almost disappointing. You expect something more sophisticated, more tailored, perhaps even something secret, but instead, you hear the same sentences repeated again and again, as if every doctor is reading from the same invisible script. The interesting part is not that they repeat it, but that they have to repeat it. And even more interesting is that it actually works. The reason this happens begins with how medicine is built. It is not constructed on personal opinions or individual experiences alone, even though those play a role. At its foundation lies evidence, gathered slowly and carefully over time. Imagine thousands of scientists and doctors observing patients, testing ideas, measuring outcomes, comparing results, and then discarding what fails. What survives this long process is not exciting speculation, but reliable truth. When a doctor tells you to maintain a balanced diet or to exercise regularly, they are not offering a casual suggestion. They are speaking from a mountain of accumulated evidence that has been tested across populations, across decades, and across conditions. If a piece of advice continues to show positive results in study after study, it becomes part of this shared language of medicine. That is why different doctors sound similar, because they are all drawing from the same pool of verified knowledge rather than inventing their own version of reality. Now, you might wonder why the same advice applies to so many different people. After all, everyone is unique, with different genetics, lifestyles, and environments. But beneath those differences lies a deeper layer of similarity. The human body operates according to universal biological rules. Your cells require energy, your organs depend on proper function, your brain relies on chemical balance. Whether you are in one country or another, your heart still pumps blood in the same way, your lungs still exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, your muscles still respond to movement and inactivity. Because of this shared structure, certain principles remain constant. If you deprive the body of sleep, it will suffer. If you feed it poor nutrition, it will react. If you keep it inactive, it will weaken. These are not cultural ideas or trends. They are consequences of how the body is designed. So when doctors repeat advice, they are not ignoring individuality. They are addressing the fundamental system that all humans share. There is another layer to this repetition that feels almost counterintuitive. The most powerful changes often come from the simplest actions. People tend to believe that complex problems require complex solutions, but biology does not always follow that expectation. Small, consistent habits shape the body over time in ways that dramatic interventions cannot easily replicate. Drinking enough water each day might seem trivial, but it supports countless processes in the body. Regular physical activity might seem ordinary, but it influences heart health, metabolism, mental well-being, and even longevity. Eating balanced meals might sound basic, but it determines how your cells function at the most fundamental level. These actions do not feel impressive because they do not produce instant, dramatic transformations. Instead, they work quietly, gradually shifting the body towards stability and health. Doctors repeat these simple ideas not because they lack creativity, but because they understand that these are the levers that actually move the system. One of the most important ideas behind repeated medical advice is the concept of prevention. It is far easier to maintain a healthy system than to repair a damaged one. Think of it like maintaining a machine. If you regularly clean it, lubricate it, and use it properly, it continues to function smoothly. But if you neglect it for years and then try to fix it after it breaks down, the process becomes complicated, expensive, and uncertain. The human body works in a similar way. Preventive actions such as maintaining a healthy diet, staying active, and managing stress reduce the risk of many diseases before they even begin. Once a condition develops, treatment becomes more difficult. Doctors emphasize prevention not because they want to repeat themselves, but because they understand that this is where the greatest impact lies. A simple habit practiced today can prevent a complex problem tomorrow. There is also a psychological reason why this advice keeps coming back. People tend to overlook what is simple and search for what is complicated. If someone tells you that the key to better health is consistent sleep and balanced nutrition, it might feel too obvious to be meaningful. The mind often assumes that something so straightforward cannot be powerful. As a result, people look for shortcuts, quick fixes, or advanced solutions that promise faster results. This creates a strange cycle. The more people ignore simple advice, the more doctors have to repeat it. It is not that the advice is ineffective, but that it is frequently not followed. When someone finally applies these basic principles consistently, the results can feel almost surprising, even though they were predictable all along. The repetition is not a sign of limitation, it is a response to human behavior. Consistency is another key element that explains why this repeated advice works. The body does not change instantly in response to a single action. It responds to patterns over time. If you eat one healthy meal, it does not transform your health. If you exercise once, it does not build lasting strength. But if these actions are repeated day after day, they begin to reshape the body. Cells adapt, systems adjust, and new patterns become stable. This gradual process is often invisible in the short term, which is why people underestimate it. They expect immediate results and become discouraged when they do not see them. But the body is not designed for sudden transformation. It is designed for continuous adaptation. Doctors emphasize consistent habits because they align with this natural process. The advice may sound repetitive, but it matches the way the body actually works. There is also an interesting connection between simplicity and reliability. Complex solutions often depend on many variables, making them less predictable. Simple actions, on the other hand, tend to produce more consistent results because they interact with the body in fundamental ways. Drinking water supports hydration regardless of your background. Sleeping well supports recovery regardless of your lifestyle. These actions are not dependent on rare conditions or specific circumstances. They work because they address basic needs. This reliability is what makes them valuable. When doctors repeat simple advice, they are choosing methods that have a high probability of success across a wide range of situations. It is worth considering how this repetition reflects a deeper philosophy of understanding. Instead of being distracted by surface-level complexity, medicine often returns to core principles. This approach is not limited to health. It appears in many areas of knowledge. When you truly understand something, you can often explain it in simple terms. The repetition of basic advice is a sign that these principles have been tested, refined, and confirmed. They have survived scrutiny and continue to prove useful. Rather than being a limitation, this simplicity is a form of clarity. There is also a kind of honesty in this repetition. It would be easy for doctors to present more complicated explanations or to suggest more elaborate solutions, especially when patients expect something impressive. But repeating simple advice requires a willingness to prioritize truth over appearance. It means acknowledging that the most effective actions are not always the most exciting ones. This honesty can sometimes be misunderstood as a lack of depth, but in reality, it reflects a deep understanding of what actually works. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the repeated advice begins to form a pattern. It is not random or redundant. It is consistent because it is grounded in reality. Each piece of advice connects to the same underlying system, supporting the body in ways that are both fundamental and far-reaching. The repetition is not about saying the same thing for the sake of it. It is about reinforcing principles that are easy to overlook but essential to follow. And perhaps the most interesting part is that this advice does not lose its value over time. Trends change, new treatments are developed, technologies advance, but these core ideas remain relevant. They continue to work because they are aligned with how the body functions. This persistence is not accidental. It is the result of continuous observation and confirmation. When something continues to produce positive results, it remains part of the conversation. So the next time you hear the same advice repeated, it might be worth considering that it is not being repeated because nothing new exists, but because this is what has been proven to matter. It is not a shortcut or a simplified version of something more complex. It is the foundation itself, presented in a way that is easy to understand, but not always easy to follow. And when you bring all of this together, something surprisingly clear begins to emerge. The repetition you once found ordinary, maybe even a little frustrating, is not a sign of limitation. It is a signal of certainty. In a world full of changing trends, conflicting opinions, and endless new solutions, the fact that certain advice never changes should make you pause. It means those ideas have survived questioning, testing, and time itself. They are not repeated because doctors have nothing else to say, but because they have discovered what truly matters. What looks simple on the surface is actually the result of deep understanding. The body does not respond to complexity the way we expect. It responds to consistency, to balance, to care that is applied again and again over time. And so the same advice returns, not as a reminder of what you already know, but as a quiet invitation to finally take it seriously. Because the real difference is never in hearing it, it is in living it. At some point, the search for something new has to end, and the decision to act on what is known has to begin. And when that shift happens, when simple ideas are no longer ignored but practiced, they stop being ordinary advice and start becoming real change. That is where their power reveals itself, not in how they sound, but in what they do. So as you walk away from this, don't just remember the words, recognize their weight. The answers you've been hearing all along were never small, never insignificant. They were simply waiting for your attention, your consistency, and your trust. Good luck on your journey, and thank you for staying curious, for questioning, and for choosing to understand.